Hello and welcome to Blastland podcast. I'm I cannot hide how thrilled I am to welcome a living legend, Normski. It's another mind-bending, soul-touching, and a real talk episode of Blastland. And today we got Normski, a man who seen it all from behind the lens to behind the decks, a pioneer, a storyteller, a cultural bridge between worlds, a DJ, a photographer, and just simply a very, very, very creative man. Normski, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a fantastic introduction. I didn't realize I'd done that much. Well, it's a
Uh,
pleasure to be here.
it sounds like you've done so much. I don't even believe we got all the time of the world to talk about everything,
No, well,
but
that's okay.
that's fine. We're gonna survive it.
So
Let's.
where do we start?
I want to break the ice with you
Go for it.
and to ask you a very, very simple question.
Hmm.
You've seen and captured the world through your lens for decades. If you could time travel to any era with your camera, where would you go?
Wow. I probably, just for the sake of the listeners, I think that time traveling is an interesting kind of reality, actually, because just the nature of photography itself enables one to travel through times. Just looking at images that were produced before the moment that you're actually looking at them suggests that in a way that we travel back in time. So if I was to go back in time for the sake of the conversation, and I would really probably go back to the beginning of taking photographs, which would be 1980s when I first got interested in photography. In no particular order, at no particular date, but very early in the 80s. Because I still struggle with the dates. It could well have been more like 1978 was when I first got my very first camera, which was purely by accident, really, because I wasn't very well one day. I think I was around about the age of 12 or 13, and I wasn't very well for a week. And I think part of the getting me better process from my poor mum was to maybe cheer me up in some way. So she decided to take me. And I'd also been asking for a bicycle throughout the whole of that summer because everyone had a bicycle. Well, not everyone, not that many people had a bicycle, but every young boy wanted to get a bicycle. Funnily enough, at the same time, whilst I wanted a bicycle, I did actually want a skateboard as well because these were all very popular things in the 70s. Skateboarding and BMX riding and or any form of bicycle was in order. But we went to an auction, which is like a sale, an auction sale. It wasn't like a flash posh auction. It was more of a kind of general sale of various different products, household products. Nothing extremely like diamonds or paintings. It was really like bicycles, which I didn't get because the bicycles had all gone, even if they had them. I don't even know. When we got to this auction and it was an afternoon off of school. It was the last afternoon I had off of school, and I think that was the last ditch to get me cheered up because I think I was probably well about 2 days before then, but I played the whole I'm not well thing. But we went along to this auction, and most of the stuff was gone by the time we'd gotten there. There was only a small pile of stuff left for sale, and the auctioneer, lifted up this camera, which was an all-in-one box Kodak 126 Instamatic camera, which comes, the camera, I think one roll of film and a little flash cube, and it all came in a kind of gift box, which was, looked like a giant toy. To me, it looked like a toy because it was yellow and blue and it had plastic covering. But it was a camera, and there must have been some interest that I'd had in cameras before that moment. But I was a little bit, I wasn't really that keen on having a camera when the offer came. Would you like a camera? And I was like, I want a bike. And I kind of feel like my mum would have said something like, well, there are no bikes. better get this or you're not going to get anything kind of thing. So I kind of just said, yeah, all right, I'll have it. Go on then. Like, you know, and I wasn't that happy leaving the auction with this box toy thing all in my brain. I kept thinking, oh, I just wanted the bike. But when we got on the bus on the way home, and I kind of looked at what I had, and I realised this is actually really cool. And it had, you know, I was quite into toys. I was quite into model making. I was quite into model building, train sets, and you know, Mammoth steam engines. I was quite a practical kind of kid, really. I wasn't really into rubbish. I was quite into building stuff and kind of mechanical and engineering type things. And so, in a way, I saw a giant kit, a camera kit, you know, just box. And actually, when I took it out of its the casing and looked through the viewfinder, and I think I vaguely, in my mind's eye, I feel like I'm putting a memory into my mind, but I do kind of remember spending a long time, even when I got the camera home, I'd never put the film in because I always came with the warning of this is the only roll of film you're going to get. So if you waste it, you're going to have to buy your own one. So I never really had an easy run. I wasn't spoiled. I wasn't given what I wanted when I wanted it. And I was kind of taught to respect what I had and also to work hard at making it better. So I did for a while just look through the camera viewfinder and I looked at the world through this little box, which suited me very well because I was very much quite into my own little world as a young guy. I kind of, you know, was quite happy to spend a lot of time on my own, just daydreaming, I suppose. I didn't know I was a genius artist when I was young. I thought I was like any other kid, a little bit lost. And the camera gave me something to focus on, really, and the idea of having this camera. And very quickly, I then wanted to know more about cameras. So I then got a magazine which had come out around that time called Photo, where other kids were getting magazines about football, some were getting magazines about war, and whatever other kinds of things you try and entertain young men, particularly with. I was more into the arts straight away, so there was a magazine that just happened to come out, which I really just loved the look of, and it literally was it was like it was a monthly magazine, I believe. Came out monthly, and it was just basic techniques, work from other photographers, and if you collected them all, you could get a big case at the end of it, and have this set of books. But I think I collected quite a few of them. But that was it, and I immediately had a new hobby. Uh, and then I did load the film up, and I snapped them quite quickly. I think of my brother and his friend, and then I also have a set of shots of my friends when I was probably about 13, 14, and because there's one picture of me, and I literally only have, there are literally about 12 rolls, 12 photographs on the roll. So there's only like I'm talking about 2 times 12, probably 20 shots, of which now, I don't know where the negatives are, because this is 1980s, very early. We're talking like 40, nearly 40 years ago. But that was it. And so I like the idea of going back to the very beginning because um, I think it's very important to remember why you like things, and it's kind of changed. It's morphed into different things, but my life has always been an eye on what I'm seeing and where it's happening and where I am. And the camera really did give me that opportunity to just capture look at what I was looking at, and then make you want to go places more because you want to see more because you have this tool that makes you have to see. So I really enjoyed that, and it got me out and about. And I mean, I was a very out and about kind of kid. So I grew up in a generation of kids that were always out. We were always out playing. We were always at somebody's house. We were always in the park. We were always on the streets. Being at home like today, I feel sorry for young people. I don't feel sorry for young people at all, actually, but I do really feel sorry for them as far as just being stuck online and finding great joy out of looking at a screen, which is approximately 4 inches by 2.5 inches, your average screen. You'd be lucky if anyone's even using a laptop, but if they are, they're using the same as mine. And it's very tunnel visioned. I know there's a big wide world out there and people go out, see what to do online and go out on that. That's not how I grew up. I grew up pre trying to contrive content, contrive the environment that we're all in, trying to squeeze it all into a screen. I was in it in the real world, and that's one thing I'm really happy about. And also, that's probably why I would go back to the time of when we weren't distracted by digital screens and televisions. I mean, when I watched TV when I was younger, I got told off if I was as close as I am to this screen right now. I was always told, sit back, otherwise you'll go blind. Don't sit so close to the television. And of course,
Exactly. Exactly.
just recently, I did actually have a detached left retina, which was a very scary moment at the end of 2024. I was kind of blind in one eye, and so I'm only just coming out of recovery now from that. And that was probably because of the excessive. I mean, I'm not just blaming it on the excessive amount of on-screen work I've done in the last few years of my life, particularly putting the book out. I spent a lot of time online, and we take it for granted, but we're always going through social networks and reading this 0.5 font, which is the smallest thing in the world, and we are constantly putting our eyes under strain. And I think my left eye just gave up. And so that was a scary moment. So going back to before computers and television took over, I used to love roaming the streets. And of course, the first camera I got, immediately I found out was really basic. And I immediately wanted to advance on that. So then I would kind of practice wanting to get a better camera by basically looking at cameras in camera shops and constantly looking through catalogs and wishing I had this and wishing I had that. And yeah, but it was a great time because, there was a lot of stuff kind of coming up because I think a lot of young people were very bored in those days and there wasn't a lot to do. And I think that we had to make things up. We had to just sort of do it yourself, design our lives, come up with stuff. I mean, I just wasn't a big football player or rugby and all those kind of typical. I was very much into basketball. But what my love was instantly was music. I've always loved music. It was a very musical household. Not that my parents in any way were musicians. In fact, nobody in my household was a musician. In fact, I can't think of anyone in my family that was actually a renowned musician. But it was a very Jamaican household and it was very musical. We loved our reggae music. And from a very young age, my parents would have friends around all the times. Or we'd go to someone's house and there'd always be music and chat. It's a very social way of growing up. So that's kind of that's my memory of how I got going with everything is that I come from a really vibrant, rhythmically interesting and colourful family. And again, being first generation born in the United Kingdom, I was born in 1966. There was something very different about us, is because there wasn't anything like us before me. So we kind of had what's the best way of putting it? I kind of feel like I had a bit of a free hand on one hand to say and be anything I would like, but also it was also worked against us because we were being stereotyped. And also, like I said this about I did a post about my mum and stepfather the other day where I paid respect to them because they came to London in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, and just did all the jobs that you had to work in factories, and they worked in London Transport and worked for a very long time in London Transport and did all the and all of my older relatives all did those sort of jobs, service jobs, nurses, post, bus and train drivers, and kind of transport work and factory stuff. And I did a really massive post the other day to show respect and love because if it wasn't for my mum and my stepfather around that same sort of time when I got my first camera, it's actually a couple of years or so after I got that camera. And I'd already by then bought two other antique cameras, a Zorki. I can remember the Zorki. And funny enough, it was Polish and Russian brands back in those days. But I bought second-hand cameras and sort of built my photographic hobby up. And one day, my mum and stepfather, who both worked in London Transport at the same garage. Mum was a driver, my mother was a conductress. And I didn't know that they had different clubs for the union workers in the transport. So they'd have, football, snooker, you name something, they had a club for it. Well, a knitting club, London Transport. I can imagine there was a London Transport knitting club. But they also had the photography club at Chalk Farm Garage, which is where I was when my family were based in northwest London. And that's where they met, Mum and David, which is a brilliant story in itself. But then also a guy called Albert, I think it was Albert Samuels, who was the photographer who led the photography kind of club that they had at the garage. And I believe that they would have lots of different photographers in different garages, and they would just maybe once a month they'd have a meet up, discuss photography and share it and maybe do pictures and stuff. I'm not sure because it was an older generation to me, but he was selling some old darkroom equipment, like an old enlarger. Basically, it was an enlarger. It was some dishes for print processing and a safe light for, which is what you need in a darkroom. It was all Victorian wiring, very old. I believe that the enlarger was made somewhere around the 50s. It was an old antique piece of equipment. So I kind of learned with this really old-fashioned equipment. And my stepdad, David, who was also, like I say, he was in the photography club, he was interested in photography, which is great for our relationship. And he's a super handy man, and he decided to make a darkroom in a cupboard, of which is where it all started at home in Primrose Hill. And that's in the space of, I'd say, about 2 or 3 years of me getting that first camera, that I had a darkroom. I had a darkroom when I was about 13 years old, which I was told by someone else who knew me when I was younger then, that she thought I was very cool because he was the only person she knew that had a darkroom. And there were other people I knew that did photography as well that I grew up with, that I went to school with, particularly one person in particular, Zach Ove. He's a very, very, very close and very good friend of mine. And his father, who's no longer with us, Horace Ove, is a renowned black filmmaker from Trinidad, photographer, filmmaker, and an activist in a way, but first generation showing and really shining a light on this sort of Caribbean culture that was based in the UK. And so that was highly influential for me as well, because I spent a lot of time, me and Zach got on really well. We both loved music. He played percussion, conga drums and bongo drums, and I played the drum kit. So we had a lot of friends in common, and most of those friends I had in common with were all very much into the arts, either visual arts or music. So that's being as well from Camden, which is, still is renowned as being one of the central musical hubs for the whole country, really. I kind of was going to naturally lean towards that kind of thing. So yeah, the 80s was a particularly special time to grow up in. By the end of the 80s, I was on television, but just to answer that first question, where would I go back to? So if I look, so if we pull out the book or pull out some of my photographs, and you look at the photographs now, because of the way I am and the way I've gone about taking photographs, my feet are in the room. I've never really been. I started off on the edge, but I didn't have the equipment to get me close enough. I couldn't afford the big lenses and all that stuff. So I became a photographer that was right in your face, which goes with my personality anyway. And I would go from walk to walk, whether it was, people on the streets or hip hop stuff. Before I was shooting hip hop, I was shooting jazz in clubs. I was shooting live stuff. And that's mostly because I love going to gigs. Me and my friends, we used to go to gigs. And people don't realize, I think in the early 80s, in the mid 80s, it sort of started to pick up. But there was no such thing as clubs. You didn't go to clubs. There wasn't DJs. You never really went to a club to listen to a DJ. You went to a venue to watch a band. I mean, in fact, we became a band. In fact, I was a drummer before I was a photographer. Age 14, I was playing drums in a local group with my friends. And then I went to college when I was 15. Instead of waiting till I was 16, I left in the 5th year and did the 6th year at college for 1 year, doing a full-time course, which is called a Day-Tech Certificate of Photographic Laboratory Skills, which ultimately was a course that would set me up to go and work in the industry of photography, from instant labs across the board to the commercial sector, really. But I learned everything you could need and more to know about basics, techniques, and then color, black and white. We also learned about art and design, which was an epic step forward for me because I've always been interested in that. And I've kind of incorporated a lot of that into all of the pictures, and just my attitude when I've got a camera, or even when I'm DJing. I do everything like I'm a total pro. But then I have learned for everything since I studied it all. When I was bored, I just looked for a magazine. Even the other day, I was looking for a book, which is I can't remember his name, Hedgecoe. It's a very old 70s name. I got a book called The Photographer's Handbook by John Hedgecoe. That's right, John Hedgecoe, 1970s photography, and it's all film stuff. There's no such thing as the word digital then. And every now and again, I look at it, and it's got loads. It's like 350 pages of every technique, of everything you could know about film, lighting, silhouettes, masking, color, art, developing, misdeveloping, overdeveloping, you name it, color, printing, color films, so much information. And I always was very much into the information overload just from reading about stuff and talking to people as well. So the 80s was really a really important time for me.
That's that's an awesome story. It flows like a river. I was cautious to interrupt you.
I
It's
thought
it's
I'd let
it's
you interrupt so you could ask me something because I could hear myself
no,
monologuing. I don't like
it's
to
a
wrap.
story.
I don't like to wrap my life up in one sentence, but I could do it. But I don't think it's fair. I think it's we just catapulted back to the 80s when I really kicked in and started photography. But what else happened? I wonder.
Normski, to be very honest with you, I told it also many times to my wife. I'm a child of the 80s, and somehow I
Mm.
have this, I don't know why, but I have this nostalgia for the 80s because I truly believe that life was much easier and much better in the 80s. Maybe I'm fucking wrong.
No, no, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I don't know if it was necessarily much easier. I think what it was is it wasn't as complicated, because there were times I think in the 80s where nothing was easy. The politics we had in this country were just substantial. Conservative, Margaret Thatcher, education cuts, unemployment was high from the 70s. But you have all these times where you can feel like there's an ending of one period. If I remember rightly, we used to be in. We went from we went from imperial to decimal. Our measurements went from inches to centimeters. I think very early in the 80s, or maybe it was the end of the 70s. That would have been that was an epic change of how we do things in life. And I think that the 80s were after some changes and also were preempting a new world, a new time, the modern age that was going to rush in. Even though I know really in the 1950s it was quite modern, really. But there was a race going on. And I think that the generation that is post the 60s, i.e., the Beatles and that kind of first time youth people had a voice of some sort. I think that the 80s is particularly special because it was it's been a time of accumulation is a great word. Everything that's happened up to the 80s has happened, and it really is quite substantial. Two world wars, whatever you want to talk about, multiculturalism, world travel. That was unheard of many, many years ago. It'd take a long time to get somewhere. You'd go by ship, or you'd have to have a lot of money. And I think the 80s, the doors to the world had opened up. People were beginning to travel beyond just to the coast of their own countries, but people were actually going to other countries, let alone people immigrating and emigrating from one place to make a permanent home in a different place. And I think there was a very powerful time. The music was fantastic. There was a level of, let's think about compared to now. There was a much higher level of freedom of speech in the 80s. In fact, I think it was something that was encouraged. And I think that the governments and the world authorities would have wanted to know what are our citizens thinking about? What are they talking about? And we had a lot to say. And if you listen to the pop music from the 80s, popular music as such, whether it's rock, pop, hip hop, and or other, if you look at what was being written and what was happening, those songs to this day, I mean, I just said to my buddy, there's the 80s brunch, there's the 90s, I don't see no 60s brunch, I don't see no 70s brunch, but there's always the old school 80s, the old school 90s. So these are obviously very important times of information. And I think that, some of the greatest films that are being copied 3 times now. The original version was done in the 80s. We're on like version 3 of many films because they have to have a new talent doing the same old character with some more modern techniques, slightly less acting skills, but a lot more, I don't know what more, a lot more complication, maybe, distraction, confusion, extras, I don't know. But the 80s, yeah, super powerful time. A lot of people were born then as well, in this generation that are the adults of now. In a way, I feel like my generation, I was born in the 60s, so I would say between my generation and the next generation, which is like my brother, he was born in the 70s, he's like 7 years younger than me. These guys, I think, were the ones that developed the future that we're in now. They developed the software. When I was learning to play drums, there was like a few drum machines you could get. They had the Lin drum, they had another drum which was like a real drum kit but electronic, but it was very, very basic. You had the 808 in the electronic music and all of the Roland drum machines, which are the very basis of all electronic music today. It's taken since then for everyone to have that sound. Then it was very special. So that's why a lot of those records that you listen back to at that time, they'll stand out because it was the first time you heard the machine. Of course, now you can't really quite tell if it's a real machine. Probably not. It's probably a sample of it. It's probably a saturated version of the first time we heard that sample. Now people are sampling records that were sampled of samples. So we're third generation down the line now, which is a lot further than away from the source. And, I remember someone said that to me years ago. You should have this, you should have that. How come you haven't done your book? Why haven't you done a book? And moaning about what I hadn't done. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I haven't actually quite, I am a book. I said, I don't write books. I said I don't write books. People write about what I do, Now everyone's writing books. They don't do nothing. They call them content creators. You have to be a content creator. There's more content creators than there is content. How about that? Work that one out. There's more people running around making up content just so they can be a content creator than there are people that are the actual content to be created about. There's more people per artist than there ever has been. When I was in photographs.
You just nailed it. You just nailed it. There is more content creators than content. That's I think that's
absolutely.
the most.
There's more TV channels than there are programs. There's so many more TV channels, variations of TV with the new online television, which can give you up to 3,000 to 4,000 channels. My buddy's got that downstairs. He's got about 3,000 international channels, and nearly every single one of them. Nearly every single. It's really bad to say that. I won't generalize. A lot of them are channels that are basically just showing you repeats of stuff that's already been made. So the content creators really are just really cut and pasting something that was already being done and then repackaging something. That isn't creation to me. I told someone today off for it. I didn't tell them off. I was honest though. I said, the photograph of Roxanne Shante that I saw you've used in your story, was that actually used by a certain .com magazine? And she went, no, I just added it to my post. I went, I'm going to let it slide this time, but I'm telling you now, I'm not really feeling people just making themselves look good using my pictures, thinking that's okay. Because I think about those through the 80s when I fought, really hard to try and get recognized as a good photographer, to work with magazines. And the way I got into working with magazines was I went to gigs with my camera and I blagged my way in. Sometimes I didn't have to blag my way in because, it wasn't such a big deal. Also, I learned the hard way that it's better to get a photo pass, then you can get at the front, then you can get good shots. It took me a long time to work that out. And then you have to hope that a magazine's going to buy the pictures, which I learned when I was at college about how to sell yourself, also who you need to talk to, picture editors, photo desks. I knew all about editorial, but I never really put into practice. And then once, you've shown that you can deliver a decent black and white live shot from a gig for a possible use in a review, then you're going to hope that one day they're going to call you. The magazine's going to actually commission you and say, look, we like your work. Would you be interested in doing a shoot with so-and-so or go to this gig or whatever? And that's what we all want. And that took me 2 hard years, man, to get. And then it was only really because of Hip Hop Connection and Record Mirror magazine. Record Mirror magazine, I used to go through the back door in the post room, sending my shots of live stuff and hope I'd be like that, wait for the issue to come out and have my fingers crossed. And I turned, Luther Vandross, my shot was there. You know, I had some contacts that were the promoters for big gigs. So I got the opportunity to go to the gigs because people saw that I was good and I needed a bit of help. And you've got to remember as well, there were not a lot of young black photographers in the United Kingdom during the 80s getting a chance. So, you know, I really had to really prove myself, find my tribe, find my people that gave me the opportunity to work, and then go and sell myself. So I find it really irritating when people just think, oh, I'll be a content creator or a journalist, and I'm just going to cut out pictures from there and add it to my words and make myself look really good. We get paid for that use of my. That's how it works. You know, I'm sorry. You know, if I got to stand up. And, you know, I'm AFAP, you know, Association of Photographers. I know about, you know, I've got, you know, my BJP, my British Journalist of Photography pass. I got that stuff years ago. I know about the unions. I know about that stuff. And I just think some of these newbies need to understand, you know, I think you get to the point in life, you go, oh, it doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it. But it actually does matter. And I don't worry about it anymore. But I do care enough because I don't want someone else who's just coming up. And I see it all the time because you can do that before. You see, now you've got internet, your work just goes from left to right and it goes everywhere. And there are times and places like with this particular story, I didn't mind because there was a good friend who did me some big favors. She wrote some great pieces about me. She also contributed to the book. I felt like I owed her something for that. She didn't want nothing for it. So I said, because it's you, I'm going to let it slide. But you have to understand that can't be a practice. You can't practice. Oh, that's a great shot. Let me use that. First things first. You'll contact the artist first of all. Hello, listen, I love that photo. I'm doing this piece for so and so. Then they're going to say, "Can you get me any money?" And you're going to go, "I don't know if I can." And you say, "Well, you can't use it then." I said, "Well, I said you can't use it because back in the day, today, I got a call. Yo, we need some photos done for this DJ. We're doing a story. I got to interview a guy next week. He's a major photographer in New York. I'm doing an interview for a big magazine over here, and I'll do the interview. And it's, you know, it's a fee. It's a professional interview. It's been set up just like this. So I'll sit there and I'll talk with the guy for an hour in his schedule next week, and it'll be brilliant. He's also a fan of my work. I had no idea he'd heard of me. So the synergy was great. It was a great commission. The magazine saw it. Norm, we think you should do this. Here's the deal. Would you want to do it? I can do that. Write a little piece, Q&A, just like what we're doing. That's how I've been trained to work. Not, just cut and slice whatever you like, and which is very like today. And I think that's why a lot of things don't last very long because there's slight lack of truth behind them. So that's where we are in a throwaway society. Of course, you can't really throw away my phone.
This is BBC Two.
I think it's time to make the floor burn.
Program about you. Program about you.
I see it. Yeah. What's up? Welcome to the Jazz Energy Coffee number 3, where we have for you live in the place to be, videos live on stage. But wait a minute, hold up.
Oh, hang on. We got no volume this time. I haven't got your. What should I do? Should close the other side, Rizzy? Learn more. Right, where's your sound gone? It's uploading. I can't hear you yet. Can you hear me? Yeah? I can't hear you though yet. Why is that? 73% loaded. 70... Here you are. You're here.
You know why? You know why? Because I have the
I'm so
mute button
I'm
on.
so glad.
Guess
It is
what? I have the
Friday.
mute.
It is Friday. I think we're allowed to accept that it's Friday now. I didn't realise, and I was speaking slowly and surely. I didn't have any idea. A whole fucking hour.
Normski, it's Friday. Thanks God it's Friday, so we are absolutely not under pressure, even if the PC runs out of power and battery. Normski, I want to ask you two things before we move on, discussing a book you wrote last year, if I'm not mistaken. But before we're gonna do that, I want to ask you two questions. Question number one, do you remember the first photographs you made of a gig?
Oh. I can't remember exactly, but it probably would have been... Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know if there's a first photograph. I can remember the first gigs. Goodness me. I've been to so many gigs. I can't believe it. That's a really good question. Is that the first gig I photographed? It probably would have been... I don't really think I did, because I'm thinking it would have been when I was in the band and we were doing gigs. But of course, I wouldn't have been photographing. I would have been drumming. So that's not the one. That is a really hard question to answer, because I've... oh, goodness me. Shit. I've done too many gigs to know which was the first one. I'm just trying to go back to my really old black and white negatives and trying to remember in my mind's eye which ones are of anybody live. And at the moment, go on.
We have a good reason.
What's the reason?
We have a good reason of making another podcast, and then until then you will figure out what was the gig.
Okay. Okay, I like the way you say, "We'll wait till another podcast." Yeah, I mean, I've done so many gigs, I can't remember that far back, man. Which was the first one of the gigs? Gigs are a funny thing as well, because I was going to. Oh goodness me! I tell you what. One of the first gigs I remember taking photographs at, which I never had photographic permission. I never had a photo pass. But I took my camera along with the intentions of trying to take photographs, and I believe I had a seat in the venue. And the seat was in the stalls, but quite far back. And I didn't have long lenses. I don't even think I had more than one lens. But it was, when I was looking at the photograph of it today, one of the earliest gigs I can remember doing in a proper gig environment. And it was at the Hammersmith Odeon. And it was in the 1980s, but it would have been quite early, say about 86. I think it was about 86, maybe 85. It could have been later, slightly, but it was the Miles Davis was playing at Hammersmith Odeon. Yeah, I did a photograph. I did a screenshot of it today. I don't know if you can see that. You can just about see that. See that? That is the front end. That's the front entrance.
I do.
It's now got another name, O2 Hammersmith, because O2 brought everything out. But an evening with the legendary Miles Davis. And judging by the way everyone's dressed in this photograph, I would definitely say that was mid-80s. 86, 87. And I say that because before I got into hip-hop, which was really from 86 onwards, 87 really, and 88 and 89 flew, I was already going to small gigs. So I remember going to Dingwall's Dance Hall, which was in Camden Lock, which is very close to where I live. I remember Tower of Power was a funk band that played there. I remember Loose Ends, who are a UK soul band. They did a gig there. I photographed. Most of those sort of photographs I'm remembering, were all, as a hobbyist photographer, that now had a new reason to go to gigs. It was now my new reason for going to enjoy the music even more, was because I could not only could I listen to great musicians, which I loved, but I could also be in the band with them because I was so close to them through my little camera, my little, lens, blocking off the whole world around us, that I was practically on stage. I was waiting for every move for the drummer to make, or the singers or the artists. I was in anticipation of what action they were about to give us in their live performance, and I was going to try and capture those moments as a still photographer in not very much light, with which was a skill in itself, using various different pushing processes to make the film seem faster, or just to get a real. And I was comparing my shots to, the big rock star shots that you'd seen at that time, Melody Maker or NME magazine, and or Rolling Stone. Everything we had up until that point was all rock stars, and so all the stage shots were amazing, epic. You'd always get a spotlight out of focus in the background. So I was trying to get live shots that matched that, and that's why I thought about Hammersmith, because when it's a Hammersmith Odeon, that was a very big venue with proper lighting and a full auditorium. I mean, I could run some off for you, and around that period. At the same time, hip hop was a new thing that was coming and happening as well. But there was a really interesting time in the mid 80s where the live bands slowed down, and then these new artists, hip hop artists and rap artists, with the DJ combination. Some of them were live, but not very many people were actually in a live band. It was more of an outfit, more of an act. And there was a very slow transition of where, now you don't get a band, and now they have to hire a band in, but it's very much the artist, the solo artist, and then they come with their band. And back in the days, it was always groups that had been around, been together for years, and with artists as well, I suppose. But I always remember working with a great promotions company that were bringing a lot of the Motown artists into the UK, and that was Marschall Arts Promotions. And Marschall Arts were very big concert organisers. And again, where I was living in Chalk Farm, they were quite local to me. And then also with my feet poodling around in the gig scene and what was going on. And I think even at that Hammersmith Odeon gig, it might have been the day I met the guy, Ray Edwards, who worked for Marschall Arts, who was another black guy, older guy than me, and saw me with a camera, saw my bright-eyed keenness, and said to me, you could do really well with that. If you're serious about taking pictures, you could do very well, And I said, well, yeah, I went to college. I love taking pictures and I want to do well. How can you help me? And he said, well, we don't employ people to do photography. We're just promoters. We just put gigs on. But we could probably get you photo passes. And then what you could do, you can give us a mention. In those days, they didn't even really ask, like now people want to get their, tag them in and give them a shout out for making sure they get their name involved. And then back then they were just keen to see me do well, and also keen to see their acts be, reproducing, because obviously there was the national press was at every gig they did. And I did Stevie Wonder, Whitney Houston, Luther Vandross, Atlantic Star, oh man, Tina Turner. I went to Germany and photographed Tina Turner thanks to those guys. I paid for the ticket. I paid to get there, but they got me into the gigs. And so what the deal was is that I could get access to take photographs with a photo pass. Then I had to go and try and sell the pictures. Hence where I started off as being a kind of licensing with all the shots I had. And that's that's probably why I'm quite stringent about people using my work without paying for it. Because when I started, everyone paid. People I didn't know. I kind of think that's how I got into some of my magazine work, was because I began to get a name for being the guy that had pictures of good black artists. And again, there wasn't a lot of press pages for black music for quite a while. So it was part of a change, it was part of a difference. And I was very lucky in the fact. So, I was at the front line of something that was not slowing down and was going to become more and more popular. I had no idea that, say, for example, hip hop was going to be a multi-trillion-pound industry. When we were doing it back then, it was cool. and you knew people were going to do quite well. But the fact that it's now at the basis of nearly everything. I mean, I remember when hip hop as a music, because there was swearing on some of it when it got a bit rowdy in the 90s. It came with parental advisory stickers. It came with a warning, don't let your kids listen to this music. It might, some crazy stuff like that. And I never thought, it's true though, right? But I never thought that I would see it, say, at the base of like a cooking program now. You get cookery programs, you get just your average kind of daytime program. You could be watching like afternoon TV for middle-aged people, and an advert comes on, and it's like hippity hop, hippity hop, and it's like a non-hip hop person, but they're actually, the same thing that once was banned is now pretty much, a very important part of the course to get the viewers' attention. We always knew everything we did was about getting attention, was about being heard. And that's why, the kind of attitude, the street clothing, even that I'm wearing now, we started that trend off back in the 80s. And now, it's like it. Everyone's it, that's it. Trainers, true to thought, sneakers were going to become people's livelihoods. And I know about 100 different people that have got their own sneaker brand by doing collabs with epic companies. And you never would have thought that. And that's a major attachment to be a part of. That smells nice.
Normski, I imagine two elder people somewhere in London sitting on the couch and watching BBC, and all of a sudden in the year 1990, the BBC Two is shaking the screen with hip hop and dancing young people, and probably the quadraphonic touch and the handshake culture. So, can you use a couple of words?
Can I?
Because it's just a viral video on YouTube. Sorry, but it's true.
I'd just like to put it on the record now that street culture, from which angle we're coming from, urban street culture, inner city kids, of which I was one of, we make shit up. We make stuff up, and it's simply just a touch. It's a touch, like a handshake, a straightforward handshake. But because there were four people, I came very quick-witted, quadraphonic, which is a four-way touch. Just hilarious. It's completely made up, and I love the fact that that's what trending is, isn't it? It's something that's brand new, that gets your attention. It actually does literally describe what you're seeing, what you're experiencing. And so that program was all about that. It was called Dance Energy because that moment, the explosion in people wanting to be around dance music was just unbelievable. And it had been going since 88. It had really been going since the late 70s. If you want to look at hip hop dancing, the b-boy break dancing, not everybody could do that back then. Some of us had to stand and watch and go, wow, that's crazy. Never thought they were going to be out of breakdance schools worldwide, street stars, contemporary street dance. That was, come on, that's like invented as well. So when the TV show Dance Energy hit the screens, what we were doing was we were bringing everything that was happening that week to the screen. It was a weekly program. It wasn't, this is from 5 years ago, or no, it wasn't even so much about this is what we got coming up in a few years. This is what we hope to do. It was nothing like that. Our show was this week. This is the track. This is the club. This is the look. Let's go out of town. Let's go up north. We'll go for a street style. Find out what happens in Manchester. We don't know. We live in London, so let's go there. Walk the streets. Find interesting people and actually ask them straight up. Where'd you get that from? What are you into? So you've got a profile, an idea of. And that was a really popular part of the show because, we didn't really have internet then, bro. We didn't have any internet during that show. The closest we got to internet was faxes, so everything was word of mouth, periodical magazines, which were weekly, some of them, and you might have a couple of like a little column in the back for your scene. You had monthly magazines that would only talk about the, and then here we are with a prime time, straight after school, early evening TV viewing, youth audience, intended for a youth audience between the age of, I guess, 15 to 23, which I think that was the age, roughly the age, or 20 or something like that. As it happens, it ended up being a program that was watched between the ages of 8 and 45. Then a full family view, that show was. Big Brother, we used to watch it while little brother, now little brothers are growing up, he's a big producer. I meet people all the time that tell me they used to watch that show when they were younger. And I look at them and I go, man, you must have been really young. And they said, yeah, I was 8. And I think, wow, that's how long ago it is, isn't it? So you'd be 39 now. So that makes sense. You know what I mean? So it's like a kind of bed and I'd say bed and breakfast is more like it's food for thought. It's part of people's diet, really. It's been part of a whole generation's diet, to an introduction to the energy of a scene, really, which wasn't just one kind of dance music at all. We literally had everything. Funk, we had it all, But even indie dance stuff that was coming out from the north, some of the bands up there, Happy Mondays and groups like that, which were combining indie sound with, funk beats, scratch DJs, and there were some interesting groups that were kind of transcending from live groups and incorporating the electronics, but still had that live element, writing songs. The Soul to Soul outfit, all the Galliana, all these sort of acts that we had in the 90s, that kind of emerged out of that time. But it was a really special thing. And then the other aspect of it was creative television. The Def 2 slot was definitive television, which was a channel within a channel. And within that channel of Def 2, the kind of programming was the most cutting edge style of document making. Journalism had to be on point. Journalism was done by the people that it was talking about. So it was young people asking, not old stiff upper crust, old-fashioned people trying, so what is it like when you do? So it wasn't like that ever. It was more eye-to-eye honesty, and I think that's something that a lot of the audiences really loved, because they had never had that kind of literally seeing their mates on television, and then everyone wanted to be in the studio. Of course, you had Top of the Pops, which was the flagship show, which was top of the popular track, so it was all the chart stuff. And then you had Dance Energy, which was stuff that wasn't even going to get near the charts, but it was big in the dance charts, or it was just a very cool thing, or we all thought it would do well, but it didn't do as well. Some of the acts we had came and went in that period. They were part of that movement. Some of them carried on and became huge successes. And there were times when we were doing Dance Energy on maybe series 3 or something, which was a weird one, because the show started off as Dance Energy for 2 series, an independent show commissioned by Def 2 for the BBC, and then it became in-house, and they had to change the name, so they wanted to change the format, because we were running in unison with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I always think that I was on before Fresh Prince, but people keep telling me Fresh Prince was on, then Dance Energy was on, which I think is correct. But we were like a double show in that slot for an hour, and a half an hour show. It was only half an hour. I think the first series, they were 40 minutes long. Then that got reduced to half an hour, and then they changed the format to sort of match what Fresh Prince was, which was really a soap opera comedy soap. With Fresh Prince, and so we became like kind of a music you get soap. Yeah, it was like a music magazine format, but set in a house to sort of make it, domesticate it and make it friendly and fun. So it wasn't like Top of the Pop, which is obviously just in a TV studio with the live audience and the presenter in the corner. We didn't want to be anything like that. We was always going to be creative. We was always going to try and get a different perspective to television. And I think for the first time, since a few other shows that were allowed to be on, you've got to remember, I'm talking about BBC TV here. So that's the strictest, the standard of broadcasting worldwide. There's a standard one that must uphold. And whenever we got a little bit wild, we always reeled back a little bit with them. So, but we were able to bring diversity and colour and people from different backgrounds and some pretty wild shit to the flat 2 dimensions of television, which we used to have. So it's interesting in your introductory because there was, whoa, it could have come with a warning, our show, because it was the first time as well for a lot of shows where we had multi-screen activity. So you might have me talking, you'd have me, you'd see me, I'd be talking, and we had split screen, we had something on the side, and we also had the ticker tape running at the bottom, like they have on CNN and on the news. That you didn't get that in TV programs before we did it. There weren't shows that did that, and then that was because we knew that young people were able to collect all that information, and also, man, that's like the most exciting screen. Me doing the chart rundown, then we're going to go to the video lift-off video competition. Video comes flying out of a graphic, crazy stuff like that. We were trying. Young directors like Hamish Hamilton, who's now one of the leading live directors, live film and TV directors. I mean, they say he does the Olympics, he does the NFL. He started at BBC, he started on our show. He did a few other shows, but, him and Stu, they came out of my department. So there was always going to be a high level of successful and also creative and able people that had energy.
Amazing. Normski, Queen Latifah at the top of Empire State Building. That's an image. How did
That was going to always happen
together?
because I mentioned earlier on the magazine that really gave me the massive lift off particularly as a hip hop photographer, was Hip Hop Connection. Excuse me, which 1989. I think about 1989, Hip Hop Connection had arrived, and that was the Bible for 20 years. Yeah, because it finished in 2009, which was a bit sad. For 20 years, that was a monthly magazine that was all about hip hop, and the only hip hop magazine that we had in the UK that would last that long. And it was out in a small place called Ely in Cambridge, which is a bit of a distance from London. But in those days, I was a professional, working, driving as well, and I thought nothing of it when I was told about this magazine starting up, and I was told by Simon Harris of Music of Life Records, whom also employed me to do some of their early work. And so coming back to why the Queen Latifah came about was because I was in New York for what was known as the NMS, the New Music Seminar, which is a trade show once a year. I think it was at the Marriott, Marriott on, New York, and Marriott Hotel, and they would take it over for about a week. It'd be stands, they'd be having talks, demos, and obviously there were related gigs in and around town of, people basically showing you what the new talent was that was coming out, new records coming out. And a little bit like Frankfurt Music Show or the IMS, these kind of things that have continued. And I went out there, as I would always try and get out to New York. I think I probably went out there and I got a bit of help from John Baker, G Street Records. He had a great connect for getting flights from Virgin Flights, and always was ready to get that hooked up. So I went out there. And when you go out there to this thing, you're always on the hustle. So I'd go out there with the intention of making some contacts, maybe make some work, take as many pictures as I could. And of course, because Hip Hop Connection was active, we was always going to do stuff together in some way. So at the time, it was Andy. No, it wasn't Andy. It was Chris. It was Chris Hunt, the original founder and editor. Sorry, Andy. Didn't mean to bring your name in just that early. He was the continued. I'll get to Andy later. Chris Hunt was the original editor and founder of the magazine. He started off writing zines, teenage zines, and football and various other things, and just knew about this hip hop stuff and just went for it. And he convinced the publishers to go for it. It started off apparently the Hip Hop Connection started off as a telephone line concept, of where it was a phone line and you could make connections by calling up this number and speaking to other people that were into hip hop. That's where it started. And it was a little column in the back of another magazine, and then he had an idea, why don't we make that into a whole magazine? And so it became this kind of central focus for what was happening in hip hop. Anyway, we were all out in New York representing the UK, I suppose. And Chris had organised doing an interview with Queen Latifah, and he'd always ask me, that's why a lot of my shots, I did a lot of shots during that time. I had like the first 2 pages as a kind of like column page of out and about, Normski, Man with the Golden Shutter, little 2-page column of snapshots of various going from party to party, wherever I was. Most of the nice stuff would be set in the mag properly, so if it was a live review or it was a portraits of artists. But yeah, Chris said he wanted to interview her and would I do the photographs? And I said, yeah. And he threw it at me and he said, what do you reckon? It'd be really, don't you think it'd be really cool to go on the top of the Empire State Building and do? And I went, yeah, of course it would be. And I'd been up the Empire State before, and I thought that is going to look, if we can get a corner, because there's always like 100 people up there. There's a couple of viewing decks, but you can be up there and it can feel like you're in a football stadium trying to see the whole of New York, you know, over these people. But I said, yes, good idea. It was good. A beautiful sunny day. And we got in there. We met her downstairs and she was really keen. And it was funny as well because it turned out that she isn't even from New York. She's from New Jersey. It was quite funny. But when we took the photographs, I think that's when she said, you know, I'm not even from New York. But I'm cool because she was looking towards New Jersey. I remember her looking towards New Jersey and thinking, oh, wow, that's really funny that we're English people. We come to America and we're like, everyone's from New York, New York, New York. She goes, well, you know, I'm not actually from New York. I'm from New Jersey. But it was really cool. We did we went up to do the photos up there, and then it turned out that it was really windy, which proved to be a little bit tricky photographing a lady, because you know I think that there's a level of self-consciousness that you get when your hair's being blown about and you're not sure whether you look good, which would happen to anyone, particularly on her instance. That was a note that I had, and it was a case of let's get the pictures done, and then what they'll do is they'll go inside and do the interview out of the wind because he was going to record it, and obviously you couldn't have the wind. And I thought, well, that makes sense, okay. And also inside wouldn't have made a great picture, and that's how that picture came about. I always make emphasis about the wind blowing, but now that I've said it, I reckon when you look at it, you can kind of see it spiking her hair up a little bit. But she looks cool as in it, and she really loved the image anyway. I remember we did a couple of other ones downstairs with a limo in the background and all the tower blocks, the typical New York kind of pose. But yeah, that one's crazy because I don't think you see it in that particular copy, but the Twin Towers are in the background. And I just thought, what a place to have the Queen at that moment. She was like the Queen of hip hop, at the top of, the New York hip hop world. It was just a momentous second, really, and that's how that picture happened. A lot of my photographs have kind of got a story that I can make sound good, even though it is interesting. But that's one of the things I love about, like you're talking about time traveling, is it's one thing to go back in time, but in that time, what was happening? You think, well, actually, when we were getting that photograph, it was really awkward because the wind blew her hair from one side to the other in a way that I wasn't sure whether it was going to work. But we stayed with it. The colours looked great. We did the photos. We did the interview. And like Blastland, we grabbed the moments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Normski, maybe I'm wrong, but if you face the challenge, if you just do it from the bottom of your heart, I think all the things are.
I think absolutely. I think
always.
There's a lot going on. I remember Darryl. Bring Darryl into it for a second. There's always been a couple of mentors like Darryl throughout most of my life. That there's one guy I was thinking of. I can't remember his name, but it should have been when you asked me when did I do my first concert, and it might well have been the Daffs, which wasn't even like a massive concert. It was my friend Emma Seal. She had a little girl group. She's a great singer and songwriter. And right at the beginning, before I was really pro, I was good friends, school friends, and her older boyfriend was a music engineer, Chuck, a lovely guy. And really encouraged our creativity. He really did. He was our biggest fan. And he loved it. And I used to, honestly, she was like a muse. I used to shoot her all the time. I used to practice all the time. taking pictures. We'd come up with sort of ideas. She wanted to have a shot done, and she used to love doing photography. So that was great. I had a lot of friends like that, but she was very special. And I wonder whether that, when we did the Daffs, she did a concert one time at the Water Rats, which is a venue in King's Cross, a kind of underground beatnik, very, very legendary venue. And we went down to do this gig, I think, and I was very shy and wasn't really jumping in the front. So it was very early. So that could well have been way before me picking Miles Davis or some big gig. That could have been more like it. And I remember her boyfriend, this other guy actually, he jumped up, or a friend of hers jumped up, and he was like, "Hey, you're taking photographs?" And people would often say that to me all the time when I had a camera in my hand. And I am quite sarcastic. I would actually nearly get a little bit pissed off when people ask me that. I'd say, well, no, I'm just like carrying a camera for fun. Of course I'm taking pictures. I was really a bit of a show-off kind of big head, I think, sometimes. But I said to him, yeah.
I was waiting until you say that. I was about to ask you somewhere around the first quarter of our talk. Are you carrying your camera when you go to a supermarket,
not generally.
or you just
I'm
go
more
out
of a mission
somewhere?
man. I don't do that anymore as much. And sometimes I do. But no, I don't generally have so much other baggage and stuff I'm carrying around with me that I generally don't. Throughout many years of my practice, I would always have a camera on me. But I was just saying this, I did a talk a little while ago with some young people, quite recently, saying that, you can't take a photograph of every single moment, right? You've got to live some moments. And sometimes those moments inspire you in your creative thoughts. So then you can say, right, so I'll do things like with my phone, I'll have it. I know I take pictures. I'm obnoxious with the amount of pictures I take with the phone. And I say to myself, if you're going to take pictures, bring a camera out of you, because I can't stand just using a phone like it's a camera, because you can't do what you want to do. But I always say that when you have a camera on you, at that moment in time, you have all intention of taking photographs. You've gone out with a camera. Whether you actually hold it up to your eyes isn't the point. The point is you've got a camera on you, which means at that moment, at any point in that time, you become a photographer in a second. Something happens, you're like, whoa! Or if you see something, that's a good shot. You could be doing it. Once you've got a camera on you, you're definitely going to take pictures. And I think that's a really big deal about, I say to young people is, you don't have to take every photo. Like with a roll of 36, which a lot of people can't comprehend. What do you mean, roll of 36? When you have a roll of film that's 36 shots, you've got 2 rolls of film, one colour and one black and white, and you go out to take photos at a gig or any photos of anyone. That's your basic setup. Some people are 24, 48 shots. I'll go the extra third and I'll go for 72 shots, yeah? But every one of those shots, you might get the shots in the first 4 or 5 shots that are brilliant because you know how to take photographs. Or you might have to shoot loads because you keep looking to see what you need to do better because you're on digital and you've got like 1,000 shots. You don't even think about how many shots you've got because so many shots. So there you go. So when you've got less shots, say like you've got a plate of sheet film, you have to set that thing up perfect before you take that one shot. And so what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to take 1,000 shots. But I don't want to see 100 shots. I just want to see one shot tell me everything. If if you're doing editorial, telling a story or fashion shoot for, brand or whatever, they're great. But really, you just want to see, you just want to go in an envelope and go like this, oi, I just got this back today. I'll show it to you because it's Guru, great rapper Guru. Nobody's ever seen this photograph in their entire life. I've never shown it to anybody. This is the brand new collection I'm working on. I'm going to let you first see it first. And it's Guru.
Oh, wow.
And he was just coming out of an interview. See, I'm on to the next level now of my printing techniques. See that? Yeah, you see that double X head? Two profiles.
Yes.
It's a mean print, man. Woo! It came back real good. It's only a test. I thought, let me just see, because I've been working on this stuff for ages.
That
It's very
was
nice. I'm
very
very
cool.
happy with that. And so yeah, so I can't remember what I put out. Yeah, and I think that was what it was. I had an opportunity. He was at an interview, and between finishing his interview on BBC Radio and walking out to his car that was going to go and take him further afield, I had a couple of minutes with him. And in the double doors, coming.
Normski, Normski, it was a premiere. Just to tell our listeners, you showed something you didn't show before to
It's a
anybody.
new
So
collection I've been
it's
working on of reproduce images as art pieces of some of my photographs, and I've gone through some various different double exposure processing, and I wanted to see how they come back as a fine art print, and they've come back looking rather spectacular. So that's something that will be coming out in the future. But that's again because I like to revisit the greatness, and I did that when I was coming up. When I started off, I didn't have a lot of money. I really didn't have very much money at all, so I had to find different ways of how to get prints done. I got interested in Xerox printing mostly because it was really easy to play around with a Xerox machine, really basic and quite thrilling and quite rewarding, but also really cheap. You know, whereas when it came to color printing, oh, that's a lot of money. I worked with color transparency so they could go straight from the transparency straight to the page, straight to the record sleeve. People really didn't buy prints like how I'd make prints. I could have made prints for sale. I probably would have just been making prints like that. But that, when I started off, was a really printing color first full stop was a really expensive labor. You'd have to have a lot more equipment and the stuff for darkroom work, or you'd have to have a good budget because getting it done professionally wasn't cheap. I did all of my early black and white processing and printing myself until I started to get enough work that would accept standard 10x8 shots, so I could just get them. I would literally go in, get the films developed, and just pick 2 shots, get a print, and just get that to the when I didn't have a dark room, that became very convenient to have accounts at various laboratories. And I've worked through all the labs in London. They all know me. They all know Norm. They all love me as well, because when I was struggling and my checks would bounce because I didn't have enough money to pay for the processing, they'd always wait and not do me in, and then I'd eventually pay it up. And they do me favors in advance, and they all had faith in me. Joe's Basement, Metro Photographic. Those 2 labs were pretty much where I pretty much spent all of my money. A lot of people, I don't know what they're spending their money on. I'm talking about when I was doing gigs, I'd go and do one gig, Hammersmith, and I'd race back to Joe's Basement, which was a 24-hour lab. I'd put all my films in to be processed in there. They'll be done in an hour. I'd wait around the West End. I'll take them all, go home, go in the dark room straight away, do the right print. Next morning, bam, in the post box, bam, print done. Now we've got internet. I've seen people sit there, take a photograph at a gig, and I'm standing there looking, thinking about taking pictures, and I'm looking at them, and they've got this high-tech equipment, and they've taken a photograph, then they're over there on their phone, and they've shot the photograph straight to the phone, then they're on the Photoshop, just touching it up a bit, and then they go like that, email, bam, and then within about 1 minute, they go onto Reuters, and the photograph is just there live from the gig, and I'm thinking, wow. That's how fast people they need the information, but I think, again, it comes and goes so quickly that nobody ever really saw it. So I'm quite glad to still...
imagine you would have had. Imagine you would have
I
had
would
this
be a
technology back in the
multi-millionaire.
80s or 90s, but Normski, your new book, The Man with the Golden Shutter. Do not disclose us the content. We're gonna read your book, but tell us, what does that book mean to you?
The family grew up. I had this family that all grew up together, but they're always broken apart. They're all over the place. And I managed to bring them all together and then send them all out together as one. It's like I had kids and they left home. What does it mean to me? What it really means is it's basically it's really my life's work in the the majority of the sort of big hitter work that I've done in the hip hop field and street stuff. It was a very hard edit to put together, but it's a very big book. It's 272 pages, and it defines the mid 80s, the mid to early 90s of my sort of journey through the world of hip hop and dance music. Really, I mean, there's the important elements of it at least, and it has also got quite a personal thread because I think it's the first book that really represents my generation in from the UK, that is, as well. It's a UK perspective on the world of hip hop and dance, through my eyes. That's what it means to me. But what it contains is a great collection of many artists and individuals, predominantly hip hop, UK and American, but it presents them in a really personal situation. It's not like a poster book. The pictures, you're like, most of the pictures I look at now and I think, well, that looks like I did that. Well, they all look like I took them, but some of them, I know some of them are actually snapshots because I was hanging out. That wasn't really like, it's when you go beyond it being photography and then it becomes documentation of a moment. I think that's, I get a lot of that when I look. There's a photograph of, one of the biggest rappers, two of them, in fact, three of them, really big rappers from the States. They're all asleep, and I love the idea of them being asleep when you don't see rappers. Oh, he's on 7 o'clock. Oh, good. You got another 5 minutes and we're done, bro. Reload. I like that word too. Yo. Oh, thank God. Okay. I had to change up something. I don't know what happened. The server's going crazy. It's Friday. Come on, we're going to have to speed it up now, so let's go. Where were we? I got rudely interrupted. I forgot what I was saying.
We were discussing your book. All of a sudden, the computer decided it's Friday and it needs to sleep. No, it makes our podcast so cool that we have to make
that's fine.
2 technical stops, which is absolutely fine.
Well, yeah. What do you want to know? What else can I say? What can I say about the book without telling you about the book?
Normski, I wanted to ask you a question, which I'm asking every participant of the podcast. Are there any things you would recommend and advise to young people of today? What 3, 4, 5, 2 things would you tell them today?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to try and remain young in your outlook on everything you do. I think when I say remain young, an old guy once said to me when he looked at my photographs, and he didn't look like he was a hip-hop person. He was an old white guy looking over my shoulder while I was showing my portfolio to a friend. I mean, there was mostly hip-hop shots in that portfolio at the time. And it was like a little A4, book. Now it's just, I had my first early stuff. So I was being, quite outward, showing it out. And this guy peeked over my shoulder and he said, oh, those look good. Can I have a look? And I looked over my shoulder and I thought, and he looked okay. I said, yeah, of course you can. I suddenly felt like the little student and this older guy was looking at me. And I really loved it. I always take heed of people that when they look through your work, they turn the page and they look at the photograph. They look it up and down. Then they turn the page and they, and they look, Some people do just flick through the book real quickly. Oh, this is what you've done. All right. I hate that because you're not really looking at the book. And this guy was quite slow. He didn't say anything. And then I was with my friend, and I looked at my friend, and he looked at me, and we were thinking, who's this guy? And then we wondered whether he might be some old professional photographer, because where we were living, it's very artisan types. But he was just really cool, and he might have made noises like, oh, nothing much. And then at the end of it, he said, I really found your work fabulous. It's really great. And I see something you do in there, always do that. Always remember, keep it fresh. And when he went fresh, I was like, bro, that's like a hip hop saying, yeah. But I got where he was coming from. Always, always do something new. Like, this is already like really new looking and already fresh. You must make sure, I always say to people, young people, try and be original, especially to yourself, what you're about. And don't stop worrying about what anyone thinks about you and what you like doing. Focus on you and what you like doing. Because you can't please everyone, but you can if you're pleasing yourself, and people can tell. And that passion, I think, is what you need to have. That was 4 things, but passion is at the heart of it all. Is the honesty and the really, be hungry. And if you don't like something, I always say to people, if something's not going well, just don't do it. You can come back to it another time. Just do something completely different. But I did that for years, and I don't mind that I did it. And you can't help but doing it because you've got to build that confidence. And you never want to be too satisfied. You always think, well, that's really good, but actually, yeah, you're always your worst nightmare judge. Is you always say, I could have done this or I could have done that. So what you do is the next time you do it, you do the things that you could have done, but you have to have taken one step. So it's a step at a time, and really embracing it. Embrace it, embrace being really shit at something. Enjoy trying to get better. It's really good fun. It's experimenting, trial and error. I think a lot of people don't do anything because they're scared to make the error. But the error is actually the lesson because it's not an error. I now call errors art. It's actually, it was some of my best images were with intention to get a photograph, but there were mistakes. They were definitely not what I expected to have taken. But actually, now I look at it, that's the moment, isn't it? So I came up with all these wired ways of making it okay for my pictures to be slightly blurry or a bit out of focus or have movement, because I like all of that. And I keep telling myself and I keep believing that. And then to this day, I still look at some of the images and think, oh, God, that might not be sharp enough. And then I stand back away from it and go, what am I talking about? It is what it is. That's what it is. It's not going to be sharp or not sharp. And there's no fucking rule book about it's your picture of what you've taken. So no one can judge it at all, actually. All they can say is, oh, I really like that. Oh, it's all right. And then that's all that matters, isn't it? What you really want is for you to be able to stand by your work and know that the message has reached other people. And when that happens, it does make you go away and feel like, yeah, it enhances the moment, which has nothing to do with me. It's purely to do with the moment on captured on film, which a lot of the books like that, I'm in the backstage room of, Wu-Tang Clan, or, I'm on a tour bus, or just, a lot of the shots, just they're very up close and everyone is real proper, not that, rich or famous, well known, a few of them, but there's a different kind of, I think it's because it's like homeboy to homeboy kind of energy rather than, fanboy, GQ magazine top photographer doing a shoot with an artist. So what I have to do is I have to get you styled by the top stylist because it fits in with what GQ's about. So then they're just taking you and then putting you in to enhance what they're about. Funny enough, now most of the acts already look like that, so they all fit perfectly, and it's all a lot about the look, which is perfect for photography. But I think we've in a strange way, I've been partly responsible for helping to endorse a lot of street style and stuff through all the things I've done. I also think that it wasn't really just about the look. But then it always was about, from my point of view, it was always about how it looked, because I would go out of my way to adjust people to the way I thought they should look in front of the camera. I would actually do that quite a lot to help people. And I realised it wasn't that I was styling them or anything. I would always be the one to hope they brought a look with them, brought some change of clothes. They were doing, I did a load of promo shots of groups and artists. Most people have had organised their wardrobe and how they're going to look in their press shots. It's a pretty straightforward thing. But then there's the other thing of that attention to detail, where I would probably more work one-on-one with most of my shoots, because I'd be more like a rock photographer, going into the environment, hanging out with the group, getting some shots, you know, getting that relationship going on. I wasn't the one where I would always be pulling them out, big studio set up, loads. I trained in all that and did all of that, but it was all so cumbersome and such a big deal that I always opted out and really enjoyed the adventure of not quite knowing if the light was going to be good, meeting up in some strange location, you know, and that was always kind of, it was a little bit one-sided, but there was always, I would get a thumbs up, but it was always a very, you know, not necessarily sure from the artist's point of view or my point of view. And then we'd go and create. And I think that there's that element of that's where I say personal. You can see that it's not like people look like, nobody looks stupid in any of my photos in the book. And it's a really honest depiction of them as natural people, not necessarily just as to whatever. You might watch stuff, and if they're not physically looking like they're DJing or on the mic, you wouldn't be sure whether they're a rapper, a dancer, or an MC, because it was more about taking photographs of people that were, you know, I wanted to get to the people at the source of, because a lot of people have changed and morphed into different. They've done loads of stuff. 1 minute, someone was a dancer. They were a dancer in one group, and the next thing they were a rapper. Now they're a big time producer. They've got their own clothing label, you know, through their. That, you know, some people have gone into filmmaking. It's unbelievable. You know, I remember Overlord X, who was a great rapper, did a couple of big albums. He was one, you know, had a proper record deal for a while with Island Records, I believe. And in those days, not a lot of people in the early 80s and mid 80s and late 80s, to be fair, a lot of UK artists didn't really get much support with the record companies. Hence why the indie dance music label thing is so big here, because it was forced out of people, you know, need to get the music out. And so then that happened, that started happening a long time ago. But yeah, there's a lot of artists that, you know, have, like Overlord X, he went, I didn't even realise he was into photography. His sleeves used to look really good, and I took did a press shoot with him once, but he had his whole kind of visual side taken care of. Years later, he was he's like a top level photographer, special effects photography, you know, shooting video stuff. You know, he's just got running his own business for years, really successful. He had nothing to do with rap necessarily, but, you know, that and more. And it's just a great thing to see how many people, obviously, you know, the rap time and that kind of 80s, 90s was a period, just like now is a period, you know, you're still at the root of it all, is people. And that's, you know, really, I think that's where the photography and me, probably, that was where photography was really good for me, is that it kind of helped me to like people. I think I've always been intrigued by people, but the photography has been a really good thing. And that's reflected in my personality and what I've gone on to do. And is that, you know, I think we immerse ourselves in each other, and then we, you know, we reflect, hopefully, the better sides and or not even necessarily reflect. Sometimes you kind of you're reflecting someone else up. You know, you're boosting them over there. You know, you're an artist. I'm taking the picture. I take the picture there. I just want people to see you. I want you to look great. You know, it's a mad world, really. You know, you just get these people there, like, they're invisible characters, yeah, producers and stuff. Like, I got the shot of the bomb squad, Public Enemy producers, Hank Shockley brothers, and the other guy. And I didn't realise till later on they're in Chungking Studios and they're working on finishing the mix for the Public Enemy album, the big album. You know, and one of them's got a Public Enemy t-shirt on, and it's this ratty rock and roll. You know, Fifth Avenue, Chungking Studios, you know, proper rock music, AC/DC, all the Def Jam music, Rick Rubin, all that heavy. You're like, whoa. And it's literally reminded me of the rehearsal rooms I used to go into in Camden where the Clash would play at, which is where I grew up. So there's all that kind of punk element similarities that we are, you know, that's the youth culture, and that's that kind of always young at heart, wild, against the system, rebellious and stuff. And, you know, that photo there is, again, I'm in the studio. I had no idea I was in the studio before the fucking album had come out. But how the hell is that's my life, you know? I ended up in New York, probably, and again, during the seminar. And I'd been hitting, I remember my mate was at New York Uni doing music producing course. I mean, he was doing a degree in music production. That was a big deal. My buddy moving from Northwest Hampton to New York for 2-3 years or something. I think he was there for about 10 years in the end, but he was out there. I went and met him out there, and I'd make an effort to find out Sleeping Bag Records, go down there. I usually would come out with some records and maybe a T-shirt, and probably didn't get any photo work, to be honest. You know, there was a time when I was out in New York flogging myself before as a rapper. You know, first time I went to RCA and Def Jam Records, I actually had a demo tape. I had a demo tape, 4-track recording with my multi-tracker. I had a Fostex X15 multi-tracker, 4-track multi-tracker, which, interestingly enough, in my first proper job post going to college, learning about photography, I then worked in a music store, which was a part-time job on the weekend that turned full-time for a little bit. And I used to sell synthesizers, guitars, amplifiers, all the accessories for a rock and roll band. And we only had drum machines. We didn't have drums, which was kind of good. It was good because everyone in the shop was a really good musician. The guys were all young. Simon, Dave, they were really lovely guys. Ed and Jack, I think Jack's passed now. London Rock Shop, that place made me. That was like, the money I made working there, which was nothing, £10. I think it was £10 on a Sunday for a day's work. 15 quid, I think, on Saturday. Can't have been that little, man. It could have been, you know, we took a 1980 something. That was a lot of money. I had 15 quid. I used to pay my way for the rehearsals. When we had rehearsals, and it was like 15 quid. My 15 quid, the whole thing used to go down. I'm sure it wasn't 15 quid each. Anyway, you know, that's how I've been, man. You know, just bobber job it. But when we had the shop though, that was the best because I was ultimately a T-boy. I was basically a T-boy that would be there to go and get the boxes. If someone bought something, I'd go downstairs, bring up the keyboards. You know, we'd tidy up the place. General dog's body, to be honest, you know, if someone comes in and they want to buy some guitar strings and you know where they all are, you'd be like, here you go, Ernie ball, here you go, E string, D string. I'll go into the tilt. You just, and you know, then it turns out to be some rock star guitarist. You don't care who he is, but you have actually served the purpose of being a retail salesman. But the official title was T-boy and cleaner. And that was great because I met a lot of people. I got a lot of opportunity to be immersed into this industry of rock stars and rock and roll and music people as part of it, rather than, you know, I grew up with it, man. It's been around me all my life, but it was an interesting time because I was having to decide, am I going to be a drummer in a band that's not really going to do necessarily that well, because we were all kinds of different shit was going on with the music. And we had this great level of just playing music because we wanted to, not necessarily because we wanted to be a big band that was successful. That was fine. But I also had my photography, and I really loved the photography and was getting music with that too. So I went that way and left all my friends in my band and went off into photography. And you saw me less and less because I was out taking pictures.
But you
No,
never left the music scene.
Someone said to me one time, this wonderful lady, I was playing her, and go on.
Normski, I have an idea. You play the drums. I do play the guitar and the piano. And next time we meet, I promise you, we're gonna rehearse together.
We're going to have to organise me coming back over to little sunny Zurich, and we'll sit down in the studio with the drum kit and the guitar. Well, hell, we'll get Darryl. Darryl probably can play something. I'm sure he can play something. And we'll have a little jam.
We have to ask Darryl what he plays, and then we're gonna jam.
The word jam is
Agreed.
underrated, underused.
Agreed.
That was the word jam. We used to jam. That's what we do every time. Remember I said to you about I paying for my rehearsals? That was a jam. We couldn't, whatever anyone had, £5, whatever, it was £25 for like 4 hours in the rehearsal room. Something like that. Pay it. We go in there, set up the kit, and just jam non-stop. And that's what I say. That's what I say to young people. Just get jamming, man. Too much thinking and talking, not doing enough. Just do stuff.
That's a wise thing. Normski, it was legendary. I had an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Honor to have you here. I'm
It's all
grateful
right,
that
man.
you found the
It's
time
all
on
good. It's
Friday
been a
evening
perfect end to a
to
week.
what?
I'm really glad that we could talk, and it's been honestly, it's actually been a great way to set up the weekend.
Absolutely, absolutely. Same on my side. I wish you a
Thank you.
very, very wonderful sunny weekend. Um, Sunny and beautiful photographs for the weekend. Or maybe without
Exactly.
photographs,
In fact, I
just
probably will
enjoying
have a
life.
photograph off because I've been very busy. And look, I might have told you I had surgery in my eye, so I've been taking it but it's been a very creative time
Yeah,
because it's not, like I said to you before, it's not just about doing it. Sometimes it's good to just think it and do something else. So I'm going to enjoy a weekend off, actually.
that's a good idea.
Thank you even
Normski,
more.
thank you very much.
Definitely.
And
Send me when it's finished. I'd
we
love
are
to
in
hear it
touch.
all. When you've got it all cut together.
Of
It's been a
course, of
pleasure.
course,
Nice to
of
talk to you.
course,
Blastland.
of
Take
course.
it easy.
Cheers.
Bless. See you.
Thank you,
I'm
Normski.
still recording. That's excellent.
See you. Bye bye.